Hey guys, thank you for joining us today. I am here with somebody who has helped my life immensely, WMPYR. And he has a channel, if you have not heard about it, where he teaches some of the fundamentals of martial art that's based in the Philippines that goes by many names. FMA, Filipino Martial Arts, or Arnis, or Eskrima, or Kali,
Yes.
or probably seven or eight other names that I don't even know about, depending on what part of the Philippines it's from. And I have learned so much. And some of you know that I've been into martial arts anyway for gosh 40 years. So now, but watching the WMPYR's videos has really helped me a lot. So I wanted to pick his brain about what he has learned practicing for. How long have you been into martial arts?
Well, I started in 1990, so that would be like over 35 years.
Yeah. So you've seen and you've taught people and you've worked yourself and you have seen people develop from probably that whole stuttery phase where they can't really tell their right from their left
Right.
until they get to the point where they're like a blender coming at you.
Yes. Yes, yes. I've seen it all, I feel like. Yeah.
Good. So I think we're going to have a cool conversation today.
Mm,
What? So one of the things that I try to accomplish with this channel
mm.
is I want to understand brain development, and I want to understand how being more ambidextrous helps your life. And like recently, it seems like there's kind of an argument back and forth between those who are proponents for ambidexterity and those who are like, oh no, people that have schizophrenia show signs of ambidexterity, so stay away from it. And what my personal thinking is that there's when a person has schizophrenia, both sides of their brain are firing at the same time. And so it's a predetermined ambidexterity that they can't get control over one side of the brain. But that's not what we're talking about with martial arts. We're talking about learning coordination and getting better skills to get the one side to flow with the other and be more, I guess, harmonious in the way that we move,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes. Definitely what you said, like people that, let's say, they want to fight, you know, I I tend to see that it's more technical and they tend to focus on like single stick, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then, they say in the street or in real life situation, you never know what can happen.
Right.
So then for that kind of mindset, there is the use both. But really, I think the both is more like is more developmental
Mm-hmm.
rather than practical. So if it really came down to it, I think you are going to favor your the
Predominant hand, yeah.
and you're going to stick with that. And I think the best fighters, they tend to do that. But I think maybe also an interesting, completely different tangent is you can attach in your training, because right now we're just talking about skill, right? Skill,
Sure.
right hand, left hand, and then both.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but if you start attaching emotion onto that, right?
Mm.
And since you just mentioned schizophrenia, right?
Yeah.
Without the control. But in a real life situation, you are going to be in a situation where you don't have the control. Like
Right.
it's scary. You don't know what's going to happen. You didn't plan for this attack, right? So that is important for any martial artist if you're thinking about
Mm.
self-defense. So you
Well,
have to put that kind of stress and pressure on your training if you want it realistic self-defense, right?
that makes sense. And like, I'll just give you a quick example. This morning, I was walking my dog,
Okay.
and my neighbor and I were talking, and this guy comes stumbling down the street with a stick. Well, I think it was a golf club
Mm.
in his hand, and his hair is like all frenzied, and he's just looking wild eyed. And my neighbor reaches into his pocket because he carries a knife in there, and he was like, "Does that guy look sane to you?" And I was like, "No, he does not look sane to me either. And so we just sat and we watched him go by, but you don't know what you're dealing with. And nowadays, who knows what kind of drugs some people are on. And it's not that you are out there trying to look for a fight to pick, but you should be able to protect yourself in case. And I'm just in that moment of he's across the street coming towards us looking kind of crazy. We're both like, getting that panicky
Right?
kind of a feeling. And it's like, but you just never know what somebody's going to do these days.
Yes, yes. And depending on how you guys reacted, you don't want to draw him in either. You don't want
No,
attention to where he starts zeroing on you guys.
exactly.
So, yeah, those things are definitely a factor. Um, being able to stay calm and cool and know, like, there was a period of time where I wanted to, like, I had done a lot of the skill practice. So now I was like, okay, for real life usage, what is this going to look like? And
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that, there was a time where I lived in a bad neighborhood and I walked around with karambits,
Mm-hmm.
combat knives and stuff. But I had the sensibility to know that if I use this, whether it's self-defense or what, if I use this, it's going to be very, very tremendous, extreme. It's going to be ugly,
Yes.
regardless.
You're in the most extreme situation that you need to be in,
Right.
you know.
So I could honestly say that 90% of the time, probably higher, 99.9% of the time, it's just having that made me feel at ease that if
Mm-hmm.
needed, it's there. But we really, really don't want to be using this thing.
Right.
So,
Well, I think that's how most gun owners feel.
and they
You know,
they should. If they don't, you want to,
yeah, there's something wrong
yeah,
up there.
yeah, you got to check that. So, I think that is, to acknowledge that, I think is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you feel about? I was thinking about this today. Years ago, I was a substitute teacher, and we had a guest, a foreign exchange student from Brazil,
Okay.
and he was one of Hoist Gracie's students.
Oh,
And they were like, "Hey, Mr. Minix, you guys should go down to the gym and spar because you're into martial arts." And I was like, "Dude, he's one of Hoist Gracie's students. He'll wipe the floor with me." And they're like, "That's okay. We kind of want to see that." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what." I said, "If you go down to the gym teacher and get permission, I'll fight with this kid and we'll see, what happens." Dude, the minute we got on that mat,
oh,
he had me tied up. He was like a monkey, just on me
right.
that quick, and I was in a knot. But the one thing he hadn't trained for, which I trained a lot in Cook Silwan, was joint locks. And I saw his arm, and his wrist was right there, and boom! The next thing I had him in a wrist lock, and then I was up on top of him, and I was like, "Do you tap out?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm tapping out."
Wow.
And I said, why do you not? He says, "What did you do to me?" And I said, "I put you in a wrist lock." I was like, I would think that in jujitsu, because I know in Japanese jujitsu, that's something you learn.
Right.
And he's like, "No, we don't learn wrist locks." And I was like, "Why?" And he was like, "Because we're always wearing like pads when we're training because we're training for a tournament." And I was like, "Okay." I said, "You need to go back and tell Hoist that you guys need to start training with wrist locks because on the street, you're quick and you're really good at getting a person on the ground, but you can't keep them on the ground because you're used to training with all the padded gloves and everything. And it's like, that's not necessarily good for survival training.
Yeah, and this is the same problem that I have with Filipino martial arts today, which is I understand that we have to talk to Hoist to know what was up,
Yeah.
but my understanding is that Hoist Gracie probably was working on something what I call an interface, which is
Mm
a
hmm.
safe way to train, to interact and make it realistic, but to train and develop your experience, a safe way. So safety first,
Yeah.
you know. And so therefore they're like wrist locks. I mean, this can break with a little.
That's true.
So they,
And you don't know what their insurance is like down there too.
right.
Because some places, like I know some states, they don't let you train in joint locks and stuff like that because of the insurance
It,
that they have on their studio.
no, exactly. And a lot of Brazilian jiu-jitsu schools, especially back in the day, were notorious for not doing any kind of leg locks.
Oh, right.
And it's not
Yep.
because, a lot of the top guys were not ignorant of it.
Oh, they knew how to do it. They just weren't passing it on.
Yeah, they didn't want to they didn't, because it was too dangerous. It breaks before you
Yeah.
feel the pain. So
Yeah.
in order to create that safe interface, a safe training environment, but then the students misunderstand that, and they think
Yeah.
they're ready for the street, and then they meet up with someone like you and they get wrist locked or ankle locked.
One of the things that I've always taught my students is you're never ready for the street. Don't ever, ever, ever get the idea that you're going to go out there and you're ready for the street. I mean, I think somebody like Chuck Norris, as old as he is, if somebody jumped him and he wasn't paying attention, even he might get
Oh yeah,
smacked down. He will recover quicker than probably other people.
for sure.
But I told you before we started recording that I studied with one of Bruce Lee's students. His name was Manny Gonzalez, and he was an awesome teacher. And the first time I trained with him, we would train down at the park, and he said, "Okay, hit me." And before I even moved, all I saw was a blur, and his hands hit me like 30 times, and now I'm on the ground. And I was like, "How are you?" And he was an old, little fat guy at this time, and I was like, "How are you that fast?" And he was like, "Oh, if you think I'm fast," he's like, "I'm old now." He said, "You should have saw Bruce though." He's like, "Bruce was fast." And so one day I met Manny because I worked at a pawn shop, and he came into the pawn shop one day with a black eye, and I was like, "What happened, Manny?" And he was like, "Three guys jumped me in front of my apartment last night."
Oh,
And I was like, "Dang, are you okay?" He's like, "Oh, I'm fine." He said, "But they're all in the hospital right now." And they all had weapons. And when the cops got there, the cop told him, I'm from Indiana. He said, in Indiana, it's legal. You could have killed all three of those guys because they attacked you with a weapon. And Manny was like, "Nope." He said, "I was in gangs before Bruce Lee found me, and he changed my life with martial arts, and I want to have the opportunity to go talk to those guys
oh,
and maybe see if I can make a difference in their life too." So he went and visited them at the hospital.
wow.
And it was like I didn't get to find out if they really got out of their gang or changed
Right.
their life much, but I mean, just the fact that he would do that was like, that's awesome. But it just goes to show you, even somebody who was one of Bruce Lee's students can get jumped
Oh, yeah.
by the right and get hit.
Right. Right. Yeah, it could happen to anyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But wow, that is a tremendous story. That's tremendous that
Oh yeah, he was a great guy.
yeah, yeah, that's a great attitude to have. That yeah, he went and visited him after.
I know.
Who
Can you
does
believe
that?
that was so cool? Manny did. That's who does it. He was a cool guy.
That's awesome.
I really liked him. He was tough, and I learned a lot from him, even though I didn't get to train with him very long. But just some of the things, like the way you move with your feet and the footwork. He was really big into footwork because his whole philosophy, which I guess must have been Bruce's philosophy, is nobody's really paying much attention to what you're doing with your feet.
Mm.
And you can glide one way or the other, and you're here 1 second and then boom, you're over here, and people are like, "Wait a minute, how did you get over there that fast?" And it says all about footwork.
Right. Right.
Which is something I suck at. That's the one area in martial arts that I'm more like Rocky Marciano. It's like I'll stand there and take the beating, and then when I get the chance, you know.
Well, that's interesting because I kind of see footwork as like the way you saw Heaven Six connected with music. I feel like footwork is the same because that's dance, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
But I'm a piano player, so I sit down most of the time when I'm playing. So it's like I don't get to dance.
You do got to use your feet though, right? For yeah,
That's
yeah.
true. Yeah.
But no, that's
Um,
neat.
I want to tell you another story though. So when my kids were little, they're all grown now. But when they were little, we used to play this game. I didn't have anybody to practice martial arts with, so I would just teach them and practice with them.
Nice.
And we played this game called None Shall Pass. And what I would do is I would lay out these two pieces of rope, and I'd be like, okay, this is the walkway, and I've got the flag back here behind me, and you have to sword fight me and get over here and get the flag.
Okay.
And so they would line up, and I said, and if you fall on either side, that's the lava and you die, so don't fall off the
Right.
path. For years we would play this game, and it was fun until I learned Heaven 6.
Okay.
And then I taught my daughter, who was the second youngest, Heaven 6, and she worked at it and worked at it for about 2 hours. And then we played None Shall Pass, and she came up, and it was like a blender coming at me. It was just so fast, and I'm like, she's like 9. And I'm like sitting here trying to defend against this, and I was like, it was at that moment that I was like, this works. This really is a good combo. And if a 9-year-old can learn it and throw a big guy like me off balance, and she got the flag, it's one of the first times the kids ever beat me by themselves.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, to this day, I mean, like, if you saw a guy with a machete on the street and he's doing something, just flailing that thing around, making a,
Yeah.
that is formidable. I,
Yes, it is.
yeah, I don't,
And if he's swinging two of them around,
oh,
well,
you pretty much need to use a sniper.
yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's a scary thing. I used to like R.A. Salvatore's books with Dritz Duerden.
Okay.
Surely you know those books, right?
Uh, no, I'm not sure.
Oh man, okay, let me turn you on to them. Go look up the Icewind Dale trilogy from R.A. Salvatore.
Okay.
I know you like fantasy and sci-fi and
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yes.
You're gonna love these books.
Okay.
And basically, the character's a drow elf that he uses two twin scimitars. And so I emailed years ago, I was working on a book and this is how I found you. I started working on a book about the history of using two weapons of equal length.
Mm.
And so, but in the process, my computer crashed and I lost most of my stuff, so I never got to finish publishing that book. But anyway, my point was I had emailed R.A. Salvatore about it, and I asked him, why did you come up with this character that uses two twin blades? Was it because like when you read the book, the way he describes the forms and the attacks that this guy uses, it's as if Salvatore must be a martial artist or something, the way he's describing it. And he said to me, no, he said, I was just I was playing Dungeons and Dragons, and it had that dual weapon thing, and I was like, oh, I wonder what that's like. And he said everything is right out of my imagination. He said I didn't study martial arts until way after I started writing those books, and he said it's all just made up. And I was like, that's crazy. It can't be. I was like, and I said, are you sure you didn't watch kung fu movies or something and see people do it? He's like, well, I saw that,
Yeah. Yeah.
but he said, no, that wasn't really what impact. He said, really, it was just the rules of D&D, and whoever came up with that, I was just using that as the thing. And I was like, my mind was blown after that conversation.
Well, I think that says that it is a logical art. So if the other person, if in this case, if he was thinking logically, that it's naturally
right.
Yeah. So it's very logical. It's not like super advanced stuff that would throw someone off. I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times you'll look on the people that are big into HEMA, like historical European martial arts, and they'll say things like, oh, the dual weapon wielding is ridiculous and nobody can actually fight like that. And I'm like, but even in historical records of Europe, there were Celtic warriors that fought with two swords. There were Roman soldiers that fought with two swords. So it's not like it was and then there was the case of rapiers where they would fight with two. So it's not unheard of, even in European martial arts.
Yeah, and I think it's like, probably most people, you're going to go into battle, what do you want? And most people would think sword and shield, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's offense and defense.
Right.
That's very fair. But if you go, you know what? I want to be all offense.
Yeah.
It kind of makes more sense to do that. And depending on the situation, why wouldn't you be all offense?
I watched, and I've sparred myself with people with two weapons. And what I noticed is your non-dominant hand. This was before I learned Heaven 6. I was still working with two weapons, but your non-dominant hand functions as a shield most of the time.
Right.
But it's a shield that once you deflect, then as you're engaging, you can suddenly attack, and they're not expecting the attack to come from that side.
Right.
And to me, it's like, as somebody who's kind of naturally ambidextrous, like I can write with both hands. I play a lot of instruments, and you really build ambidexterity through playing instruments, but you do with dual weapon wielding as well. And I've always fought that way. Like when I was in Taekwondo, I used to teach nunchucks, and I would teach, how to use the chucks with both hands, and how to switch with one chuck back and forth between the hands. And it's like, you have to have a certain level of competency with either hand just to use almost any martial art weapon.
Yes. Or even barehanded.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's beautiful about Heaven 6. So this year I taught a class to a group of homeschoolers at a co-op, and I called it Lightsaber Academy. Okay. And basically I had these cheap lightsabers that you could get off eBay for like $30 or something. And most of the class was geared towards like learning stunt man moves and learning stunt choreography so that they wouldn't hurt themselves. But I taught them Heaven 6, reverse Heaven 6, tornado cuts. I taught them a whole bunch of figure eights, all sorts of different things. And one of the things that we did in the lightsaber class was I'm getting old. I forget where I was going with my old thing. I'm going to be 50 next week.
Oh.
And I'm just like, man.
Yeah. Same here. I'll be 50 this year. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
July.
So we're same age then. That's cool.
Yes, we are.
I thought you were younger.
Yeah.
you were aging well.
Oh, thank you. I don't feel it, but yeah, thank you.
Anyway, in the lightsaber class, we basically were working on a lot of the different techniques that we had worked on before, but we were just using it in the context of lightsabers. Right. But what's really cool is a lot of these kids, they would learn this stuff, and we would have like choreographed fights, and they looked really, really impressive, just from kids doing it,
And I mean, you look at like ancient martial arts, like Kalari, Payatu and stuff, they do a lot of choreography training rather than like full contact sparring. And
yeah,
it just makes sense to me, because you do the full contact sparring, you're going to get injured. Choreography training, it's a lot safer, but you're still developing skill. So
yeah. Well, it's like, is it, I heard Doug Marcaida talk about it one time. I forget what the technique's called, but they do the technique where you'll be like, okay, I'm going to attack you right here. And then how would you defend against that? And the other guy says, okay, well, I will do this. And then he says, okay, well, if you do that, then I'll do this. And it was a training method that is common, I guess, in a lot of Filipino martial arts, where it's like a conversation back and forth.
One.
And I was teaching my kids that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, that's a great idea.
Yeah. My school, where I learned it, I remember they called it 1-for-1.
Okay.
So you do one move and then they respond
Oh,
one
okay.
move. So
He
you're going
he
back and
he
forth. Yeah.
he's called it something in Tagalog, I think.
Oh,
So that's why I didn't catch it. But that makes sense. 1-for-1 is a good
yeah.
way of calling it.
Or tapi tapi, or yeah,
That's it.
yeah.
Toppy toppy.
There's a
Yeah.
bunch of, yeah, yeah. They're pretty relaxed with their vocabulary over there, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
So let me ask you about, like, to bring this back around to ambidexterity.
Mm.
I actually have two questions I want to ask. One about ambidexterity, and then before we end, I want to ask about swords.
Oh,
So don't let me forget about the swords.
okay.
But in your experience teaching people,
Yes.
what is like the light bulb moment that you see with a lot of people that are like, or how long does it kind of take to get to the light bulb moment? Because like I run into people all the time and they're like, I am never going to be able to use my other hand.
Yes.
And it's like, I'm like, yes, you will. Don't give up.
Yes.
What talk to me about that?
Oh, I would definitely say it depends on the person, but I mean, one thing that's consistent, I would say, is that the more closed, or the more like they have a preconceived notion, the longer it usually takes.
Oh, that's good to know, to think.
Yeah. So
That's a good.
if you could get them to open up, and I mean, flow is one of our most important principles. So if you
Mm-hmm.
get them to flow, and then as they're flowing, they're starting to, it's starting to build a rhythm. It's starting to go, and so as we're doing that, and then you tell them, don't think too much, right? Don't think.
Yes.
They freak out because they're going, I'm thinking like crazy, but they
Yep.
understand what I'm saying because they kind of let the body just kind of automatically go. It's smoother, but at the same time, if they don't think, they feel like they're gonna mess it up. So it's this crazy, like, very alive thing. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's when the light bulb goes off for them. I can see it. They're like, don't say that, and they're freaking, you know.
Well, I remember when I was teaching earlier this year, I get migraines once in a while, and I had a migraine in this one class, and I was trying to teach the reverse heaven six, and my head was hurting, and I was like, look, just go look at WMPYR's video. It's like, I can't teach you this today. My head hurts too bad. So I brought it up and I just had them watch your video, and then they worked on it until they had it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's better than you trying to show them and then mess up because.
Yeah, and then teaching them the wrong way. I said, I don't want you to learn this wrong. Let's get this right. But I was like, I'm not in it. But the other thing I've noticed is, like, with piano,
Yes.
sometimes I can play something really fast,
Mm.
and then my students will be like, I want to learn how to do that. And it's like, okay, well, how do I slow this down into something that's, because I can do it without thinking,
Right.
but it's like, how did I learn it in the first place? And
Yeah.
sometimes what's weird is when you learn combinations, whether it's a piano run or whether it's a martial arts thing, there comes a point in time when you're so used to doing it and you're so used to doing other combos that all of a sudden they start to blend together, and you're not even really conscious of necessarily what's going on,
Right.
but you just realize you just created something new.
Yes. Yes. And one of the most important things that I told my student right away, and he kind of freaked out. He was over in Japan, and I said, I want you to start teaching. And he goes, what? Me? I'm not ready.
Yes.
I'm,
But you learn more.
yeah, in order to teach something, you have to really understand it. So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
and every student does that in Filipino martial arts because technically your first student is your other hand.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So that idea of it's not I'm a teacher, I can teach. It's not that attitude, but it's in the sense of that's why the ambidextrous comes right away into the
Yep.
training, and it's to
Yep.
help you understand it better.
Well, and think about this.
Yeah,
I think kids are kind of the best example of this. When you teach a kid something, the first thing they want to do is say, "Hey, Dad, hey, Mom, look at what I can do. Let me show you."
yeah,
And then they're like, "Hey, look, it's not hard. This is how you do it." You teach a kid a magic trick. The first thing they want to do is show their buddy how to do the magic trick too.
yeah,
You know, and it's like you teach a kid a martial arts move and he's like, I want my buddy to be able to do this too.
yeah.
And it's like that's the attitude that a teacher should have,
Right,
because it's just I'm teaching because of the joy that I love this thing that I'm doing,
right.
rather than, oh, I'm a teacher now. You know, those are never the best, the good, they're never good teachers when people are like that.
No, I don't think so. I don't think. Yeah, yeah. So, you know,
So let me ask you a question. I mean, I've watched a lot of your videos. Are you originally from Japan or are you from America originally?
I was born over there, but I'm pretty much raised in Texas.
Okay, I lived in Texas for a while too. I lived in Austin for a few years and Dallas for a
Oh,
few
yeah,
years.
yeah.
I almost got a job in Baytown over there in near Houston.
Right.
Eh, But yeah, so we were in Texas for a while, and then my job moved me back to New York. So we were there, and then in Illinois, and then I retired from that job and moved here to North Carolina. So
I
I've been here for about 10 years now.
It's beautiful there.
Oh my goodness, it's really nice, and if you ever want to come visit, just let me know.
Oh, thank
I'll put you up.
you.
You're welcome anytime.
Nice.
But it's we have the mountains, so we're about maybe I think it takes about 40 minutes to get to the mountains from where I live. I live in Winston-Salem.
This
And
AT,
do what?
the AT Appalachian Trails. Are you talking?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're real close to the Appalachian Trail.
right.
We're not too far from from getting on to the app is it the Appalachian Parkway?
Okay.
Or yeah, and so it like takes you right through the mountains and everything, and it's beautiful up there.
Wow.
And then if you go from Winston out to the east, we're about we're about 3 hours I think from the ocean.
Oh,
So it doesn't take us too long to get to the Atlantic from here. So it's like if you really want to go camping in the mountains, you could be about 3 hours and you're really deep in the Appalachians. You go 3 hours the other way, you're at the ocean. It's a nice place to be.
nice. Yeah. Oh,
But I want to ask you about swords.
yes, sir.
Okay. I've thought a lot when I was working on my book that never got finished, but maybe someday it will. I'm not giving up hope. I just have to rewrite a lot of it.
Okay.
But what do you think? Like in martial arts, there are lots of types of swords from all different sizes. I mean, in ancient Japan, you have the katana, but then they had the
Oh,
really long katana,
yeah.
and then in Chinese martial arts, there's all sorts of swords. But I've noticed in Filipino martial arts that a lot of the swords tend to be about the length of a machete, maybe a little bit longer.
Mm.
And what got me thinking about this is it seems like and I watched, when I was researching my book, I watched a lot of videos of just different martial artists around the world doing combos with two swords. And it seems like the ones that worked the best were when they had swords that were maybe just a little bit longer than the width of their shoulders. And it just seemed like a sword of that length, like if you think about it, the Romans had the gladius, which is about that length. The Japanese had the wakizashi, but they had the katana, which was the main sword. But like, why did they obviously used the wakizashi too, or they wouldn't have created it and carried it around with them.
Right.
The Chinese had the Dao, and the Dao went from the earliest Dao was a shorter one, and then now it's a little bit longer.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know. So I just wanted to see what you think about what's like an ideal length
Well,
for somebody.
I think we got to look back into context, and that's very difficult because it's history. And,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the people that maybe they study history, they don't necessarily study martial arts. So it's, we're,
Right.
yeah. So when you look at the context and some of the stuff is battlefield, like
Mm-hmm.
what they were doing in the battlefield, right? Other stuff was their ancient cities. So it's
Mm.
it's that's much more closer to what we have today. Because on the
Right.
battlefield, no one fights with swords today. No one even
Right.
knives today. Yes, they have it, but
Right. They're not using it.
no, no. And if they said yes, then something went really, really wrong.
Well, yeah, they ran out of ammo.
Yeah. And where were your buddies? And what happened? That's not
Exactly.
happened. So um, back then on the battlefield, they fought a certain way, and then in the ancient cities for self-defense against bandits,
Yeah.
whatever. That's a completely different story. So in that sense, are you going to be carrying your battle axe, which yes, it does more damage. It's on the battlefield, sure. But then in the city where you're delivering bread or something, you got a sack of potatoes. Are you going to be carrying your battle axe? No,
No.
no. So then I think it's the same thing why a lot of people like tactical folding knives today is more
Right.
convenient. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, is a fixed Bowie blade better? Absolutely.
Sure it is. It's not snapping on you like a folding blade could.
Right. Yeah. But are you going to walk around with this, 14-inch Bowie blade
Probably not.
every day? No.
You're right.
So I think that context, then the shorter, and then what you're talking about is very specific with the Roman gladius. That is
Mm-hmm.
on the battlefield, but remember they fought a very specific way where they.
That's true. The
Yeah.
testudo formation
Yeah.
and everything.
Yes, if you had a battle axe, you're hitting your buddy over here.
Right. Well, and the thing too with a gladius is, I don't know if you've messed around with gladii, but man, they are a chopping machine. It's just like having a meat cleaver. And that's really what they were doing, is they're just cleaving out somebody's legs
Mm.
from underneath them, and that's what it was used for predominantly, and then poking,
And
you know.
I could only imagine where they were organized enough where 5 of them would, come at you like that, and they
Yeah.
operate like that. It's like your ancient day SWAT team coming in.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure that was hard to beat.
I
You didn't.
Well, and the fact that nobody else was using that at the time,
Right.
and then they came up with that, and I don't know, I haven't read enough yet to find out who came up with that formation, but it's just crazy that was something that somebody said, hey, wait a minute, what if we did this rather than all just running like crazy at the enemy?
I know. And so like when you watch like Braveheart or something, and let's say we were there, right?
Yeah.
First thing I'm gonna be like, hey, can we team up?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, can we, instead of just individually?
All of us going individually.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna distract the guy. Can you come from the side and flank the guy? I mean, it's.
Well, I was in Scotland last year and Ireland, and one of the things that I noticed about the land there, the idea of running across the battlefield to your opponent,
Yeah.
I don't know that that's necessarily how that went down, because the land is so craggy and rocky
Oh.
that it looks really cool on a movie, but I mean, you would break your leg
Uh-huh.
if you're just charging like that in some of the places that I went to.
Right.
So it's like, and that was places that were paved. And it's still like,
Right.
like this. And then when you look out over the hill and you see, oh gosh, those are the moors. The other thing too, okay, so I was in this castle in Ireland, and in 1936, some guy from Harvard bought the castle and restored it.
Okay.
And then he went out for a walk one day and he never came back.
Oh no.
And the people were like, well, the fairies took him. But if you go into the grounds around that castle, it's covered in this yellow flowered bush called gorse bush, which is like a real prickly, almost like a thorn bush. There are all these crags that if you step on a piece of moss, you might shoot through. The moss will cover over, and you're down in a hole, and nobody would ever find you again. And it's like, that's how the whole area was
It's,
out there. And I'm like, I can't imagine fighting a battle in a place like this.
that's like quicksand, huh?
Well, it's worse because at least quicksand will smother you and kill you. This stuff's just rocks. You fall down there and you're just down there until you die.
Oh my, yeah.
It'd be horrible.
In the Book of Five Rings, Musashi talks about being able to run in the battlefield.
Yes, I remember reading that.
He said that's a skill. And
yeah,
definitely, you know, like we're saying, it's not as easy as we might think. And
no.
so that in
Well,
itself, yeah, is
do you ever listen to Mr. Ballin? His show?
no.
Oh, dude, I think you would like him too. So you might want to check him out. He tells like creepy stories and strange, true to life stories that are just weird.
Okay.
And he was a Navy SEAL.
Oh,
And I was listening to his account of going from being a Navy SEAL to trying to figure out now what do I do. And he was talking about the battle that they were in that he got injured in. And it was like these guys were on this side of the wall. His Navy SEAL team was on this side of the wall. And they're fighting back and forth over the wall. And I'm like, you never know what you're going to encounter
right.
in a real world situation, you know. And finally a hand grenade went off, and that's kind of what the next thing he wakes up, he's in the hospital, you know. And so it's like, I don't know, actual warfare is so different from all of the training that we do. And I think that the training is really good to kind of give us an edge up.
Yeah.
But we can never get to the point where we think, okay, now I've arrived. Because there's entropy too.
Right.
As we get older, we're not moving as quick as we did when we were 20.
No.
You know, that's why I'm looking into a lot of like using a cane for self-defense lately, because it's not going to be that many more years when maybe that's a reality.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And so it's like, well, what do I do in that situation? You know?
Yeah.
And I think it's all about adapting to your environment and where you're at, you know?
And so taking us back maybe to your original question, I'm thinking like, so in a one-on-one duel, single stick, which is basically a single sword, skill might be superior. But on the battlefield, like you said, unpredictable things happen. So in that case, being able to, even if you're not as good as the guy that only does one arm, the guy that has two arms is more adaptable. So in the battlefield, that's a better thing.
Yeah, I agree.
You know?
Hey, I want to thank my new friend WMPYR for spending time talking to me. And I would like it if you could tell anybody that may have stumbled onto my channel that doesn't know about yours how they can kind of follow your stuff.
Oh, I'm just on youtube.com/WMPYR, Wampire, and I just been doing Filipino martial arts and martial arts related videos for like since 2006, like the early days of YouTube.
Yeah.
And that's
you got
it.
And your videos that you're putting out now, I'm finding I like them just as much as the stuff you put out a long time ago. And I have really delved into a lot of your videos.
Oh, thanks.
And I highly recommend everybody checking them out. Especially if you want to learn actual exercises that are going to get your right side and your left side of your brain, you know, doing what they need to be doing to help you. And I wanted to say this too. I have found that I've taught Heaven 6 now to people with Parkinson's. I've taught it to drummers. I've taught it to people that have had strokes as an exercise, even if they're sitting in their chair without sticks, just running through the motions, because and people are telling me, wow, that's really helping me kind of overcome with my condition that I'm dealing with. So you have helped more people than you know about.
Oh no, no, no. But that's really awesome that you are thinking about this kind of thing, brain development, and now with your background with music, you could bring in another dimension because there are plenty of Filipino martial arts people that like to do this kind of thing with music, the
Oh yeah.
beat, because there is a beat with the Heaven Six, but you could also emphasize where are you putting in the power, and that
Mhm.
you know, so it's not just a 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3,
Right.
the 1 2 3,
2 3.
so you
Well, that's one of the things I've been looking at with like Irish music.
mm,
Irish music a lot of times is in triplet, so you'll have like 6/8 time where it's like 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6,
mm,
or maybe you'll have something that's even in nine, so it'd be 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9,
mm,
and so it's kind of like the different, and these were all like we talked earlier. They're all based off of dances, So the jig, the reel, the hornpipe, they were all a dance from back in the day, and they all emphasized a certain step.
mm.
When you got into it, and it's like, well, if you applied that to, martial arts or something like the Heaven Six, or even Heaven Six, and add a few if you want to get up into the other, like a 12 count or a 9 count or something, then you're basically using the same rhythmic techniques that has been used in other cultures and drums and things like that. So
And that
it's
just
pretty cool.
comes down to mobility is so important.
Yeah.
I don't care what kind of warfare, whether we're talking tanks, helicopters, or the person.
Yeah.
Mobility is the factor in combat.
Cool.
Yes, sir.
Well, anyway, thank you so much for being on our show. I'm going to turn my recording off.
Okay,
And like I said, go check out WMPYR's videos. You're going to love them.
thank you.